Family members and friends of Montanae Davis just held a balloon release at this house right behind me. Now, they are celebrating and remembering the life and memory of a family member, friend, and mother.
Justice for Montanae, y'all!
Thursday, dozens of people dressed in pink with their matching balloons. That was for Montanae Davis. That was Montanae Davis' favorite color. Her family said she was also bright and full of life to match. We are approaching
her as a smart, successful, loving, and caring person. Someone who would do anything for anybody, regardless if she knew them. This is what the scene looked like minutes ago. Dozens of people sending hundreds of balloons spiraling into the sky in honor of Montanae. This happened on Wednesday morning just before 3 a.m. when officers responded to a report of a shooting where they found 26-year-old Montanae Davis with a gunshot wound. Crews attempted life-saving measures until medics arrived and took her to an area hospital where she later died from her injuries.
It is 2:50 in the morning on a quiet street in Dayton, Ohio. Most of the houses on Torrington Place are dark. People are asleep. Somewhere behind one of those doors, a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old are sleeping too, safe in their beds, in the home where they live with their mother. Then comes a sound at the back door, a hard kick, then another. Someone is trying to get in. Inside, a woman named Montanae Davis is awake. She is 26 years old. Hours earlier, she had called 911. She told the dispatcher her ex-boyfriend was calling her phone over and over. She said he was threatening her. She said she had 2 kids in the house. Now the threats are not just words on a phone anymore. The back door gives way. Footsteps move through the house. And in the next few seconds, everything about this family's life will change forever. By the time police arrive, Montanae Davis is lying on her kitchen floor, shot several times. She will not survive the night. This is her story. It is also the story of the man who took her life, the investigation that tracked him down, and the courtroom where, almost 2 years later, a judge would look at him and hand down the harshest sentence Ohio law allows. It is a simple story, in a way. A story that has played out too many times, in too many cities, with too many women. But it is also Montanae's story, and she deserves to have it told right. Before she was a name in a police report, Montanae Davis was a mother. She was 26 years old, living in Dayton, raising 2 small children, a baby who was just 1 year old, and a 4-year-old who was old enough to know his mom's voice, her laugh, the sound of her walking through the house. Public records and news reports don't tell us everything about a person's life. They don't capture the small things. What songs she liked, what she cooked for dinner, what she wanted for her kids when they grew up. But they do tell us some important things about who loved her. Her mother's name was Melissa Dennis. After everything that happened, after the trial and the verdict and the sentencing, it was Melissa who stood outside in the cold with dozens of family members and friends, all of them wearing pink, all of them holding pink balloons, to remember her daughter. That detail matters. Pink balloons, released into the sky, on a day that should have never had to happen. A mother burying her daughter, and still finding a way to hold on to something soft, something hopeful, something that looked like love floating upward, instead of grief pulling everyone down. "I'm still grieving," Melissa Dennis would say later, and happy that he got life without parole. 2 feelings, side by side, grief and relief. That is often what is left over after a case like this ends. Not peace, exactly, but the sense that justice, at least, showed up, even if it showed up far too late to matter for the person it was named for. Montanae Davis was somebody's daughter. She was somebody's mother. She had an ex-boyfriend named Jamarte Brown, and in the early spring of 2024, that relationship became the most dangerous thing in her life. Domestic violence rarely starts with a gun. It usually starts small. A controlling comment, a jealous question, a relationship that feels intense at first, and then starts to feel like a cage. By the time Montanae Davis and Jamarte Brown had broken up, whatever had once brought them together had clearly turned into something else. Brown did not want to let go. On the night of April 2nd, 2024, Montanae picked up her phone and called 911. She told the dispatcher that her ex-boyfriend was calling her, again and again, and that he was threatening her. She told them she had 2 children in the home, and she named him. She said his name out loud to the dispatcher, Jamarte Brown. Think about that moment for a second. A young mother, home with her kids, scared enough to call the police, calm enough to give a name, a location, a warning. She did exactly what people are told to do when they feel unsafe. She reached out. She documented it. She asked for help. It is one of the hardest truths about domestic violence cases. Sometimes the victim does everything right, and it still isn't enough to stop what's coming. Police response takes time. Restraining orders take time. An angry, obsessive man with access to a gun does not always wait for any of it. Somewhere in the hours between that 911 call and the early morning of April 3rd, Jamarte Brown made a decision. He was going to go to her house. The call came in at 2:50 a.m. Dayton police were dispatched to the 700 block of Torrington Place. A shooting had been reported. According to court records, here is roughly what happened before police arrived. Brown and Davis had been arguing on the phone. A friend of Montanae's was at the house with her that night and could hear the argument getting worse. Then the argument moved from the phone to the front door of the house. No, not the front. Brown went around to the back. Court documents describe it plainly. Brown went to the back of the house and started kicking the back door, then the garage door, trying to force his way in. Eventually, the door gave way. Once inside, Brown did not hesitate. He began shooting. Montanae was in the kitchen. She was shot multiple times, in the chest, in the face. It was fast, and it was brutal, and there was very little anyone inside that house could have done to stop it once the door came open. But Montanae's friend, the one who had heard the argument building on the phone, did not freeze. She grabbed her own gun and fired back at Brown. It's a detail that says a lot about the chaos of that moment. 2 people shooting inside a small kitchen, in the middle of the night, with 2 small children somewhere in that same house. Brown fled. He ran out of the home and disappeared into the dark before Dayton police even arrived on scene. When officers got there, they found Montanae down in the kitchen, badly wounded. They started emergency first aid immediately, doing everything they could to keep her alive, until paramedics arrived. She was rushed to Miami Valley Hospital. She did not survive. She died during surgery. Her 1-year-old and her 4-year-old had been in the house the entire time. By some mercy, neither child was physically hurt, but they were now children without a mother, in a home that had just become a crime scene, in a night that no child should ever have to live through. A murder investigation moves fast in the first hours, when a shooter is still out in the world, and detectives don't yet know where he's gone. Homicide detectives in Dayton had a strong starting point. They had Montanae's 911 call from the night before, in which she'd named her ex-boyfriend directly. They had a description from the friend who'd exchanged gunfire with the intruder. And they had a neighborhood full of houses with doorbell cameras, security lights, and neighbors who might have seen a man running from the scene of a shooting in the middle of the night. The investigation led them across town, to a house in the 4500 block of Queens Avenue. There, investigators reportedly watched a man do something strange. He walked to a storm sewer and dropped a firearm into it, wrapped inside a small t-shirt, the kind sized for a toddler. It's a small, strange detail, the kind that sticks with you. A gun used to kill a young mother, wrapped in a child's shirt, shoved down a sewer drain to hide it. The man was seen leaving the area afterward in a truck with 2 others. One of them matched the description of the shooter. Detectives recovered the gun from the sewer. Later that same afternoon, they arrested Jamarte Latrell Brown, 24 years old at the time, not far from where he had tried to dispose of the weapon. He was taken into custody and brought to Dayton Municipal Court, where he was arraigned on a long list of charges: 4 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of murder, aggravated robbery, aggravated burglary, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. His bond was set at $1 million. He would remain in the Montgomery County Jail as the case moved toward trial. Nearly 2 years passed between the night Montanae Davis was killed and the day a jury finally decided Jamarte Brown's fate. That gap of time is common in cases like this, and it is one of the hardest parts for families to sit through. Evidence has to be gathered and tested. Witnesses have to be prepared. Both sides build their case, and the court calendar moves at its own pace, regardless of how urgently a grieving family wants answers. When the trial finally happened, in Montgomery County Common Pleas Court, the evidence against Brown was overwhelming. There was the 911 call from the night before the murder, with Montanae naming him directly as the person threatening her. There was the account from her friend, who was inside the house, who heard the phone argument escalate, who watched Brown force his way through the back door, and who fired back at him during the shooting itself. There was the physical evidence, the gun, recovered from the storm sewer where Brown had tried to hide it, wrapped in a child's shirt. There was the account of Brown being seen fleeing the area in a truck right after the shooting, matching the description given by witnesses. Taken together, it told a clear story. A man who could not accept that a relationship was over, who made threatening calls the night before, who then drove to his ex-girlfriend's home in the middle of the night, forced his way inside, and shot her to death in front of, or at least within earshot of, her own young children. The jury did not need much convincing. They found Jamarte Brown guilty on every major charge: aggravated murder, aggravated burglary, aggravated robbery, and felonious assault. It was, in the language of the courtroom, a complete verdict. There was no ambiguity left in the case. The only question that remained was what sentence he would receive. Sentencing hearings are strange spaces. They are legal proceedings, full of formal language and case numbers, but they are also often the last moment a grieving family gets to speak directly about the person they lost, and sometimes, to look at the person who took them away. Judge Mary E. Montgomery handed down the sentence. Jamarte Brown would spend the rest of his life in prison without any possibility of parole. On top of that, the judge added an additional 25 to 30.5 years for the remaining charges: aggravated robbery, aggravated burglary, and felonious assault, sentences that, practically speaking, would never come into play, since a life sentence without parole already meant Brown would die in prison. But they were added anyway, a formal accounting of every single crime committed that night, each one given its own weight, its own line in the record. Montgomery County Prosecutor Matt Heck did not mince words when it came to describing what Brown had done. The murder of Miss Davis by this defendant was senseless and tragic, Heck said, adding that Brown deserved to spend the rest of his life behind bars. He pointed to the same detail that makes this case so hard to sit with, that Montanae's 1-year-old and 4-year-old had both been inside that house when their mother was killed. 2 small children, now growing up without her, because a grown man could not let go of a relationship that had already ended. Outside the courthouse, and later at a gathering to honor Montanae's memory, her family did what families do when the legal process finally offers them something close to closure. They came together. Dozens of people showed up, all wearing pink, all carrying balloons in the same color, and released them into the sky together. It's a simple image, but a powerful one. Pink balloons drifting up over Dayton, carrying whatever unspoken things a community wants to say to someone they lost too soon. Montanae's mother, Melissa Dennis, spoke to local reporters that day. She didn't offer a long statement. She didn't need to. She said she was still grieving, and she said she was happy that her daughter's killer would spend the rest of his life without any chance of freedom. Both things were true at once. That is often what justice looks like from the outside. Not a happy ending, because there is no ending that brings someone back, but a kind of accounting, a public statement made by a judge, a prosecutor, and a jury that says, "This happened, it was wrong, and there will be a consequence for it." It would be easy to end this story right after the sentencing, with the balloons floating up into the sky and the courtroom doors closing behind Jamarte Brown for the last time. But a story like this leaves more behind than a verdict and a sentence. It leaves 2 children, a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old at the time of the murder, who will grow up carrying a loss most people can't imagine having to explain to a child. Somewhere down the road, someone will have to tell them the truth about what happened to their mother, in an age-appropriate way, probably more than once, as they get older and start asking harder questions. It leaves a mother, Melissa Dennis, who now has to carry both grief and grandmotherhood at the same time, mourning her daughter, while likely playing some role in raising the children her daughter left behind. And it leaves a pattern that shows up again and again in cases like this one. A woman who tried to protect herself. A phone call to 911. A name given to a dispatcher. A clear documented warning that danger was on its way. And still, none of it was enough to stop a determined, armed man from kicking down a door in the middle of the night. This isn't a story about a stranger jumping out of the shadows. It's a story about someone Montanae Davis had once let into her life, someone she had trusted enough to date, who turned that trust into a weapon after the relationship ended. That's what makes domestic violence cases like this one so different from a random act of violence. The danger doesn't come from someone unknown. It comes from someone the victim already knows by name, already has a history with, already has tried to move on from. Montanae did move on. She ended the relationship. She called the police the night before it happened. She did the things people are told to do to keep themselves safe. It still wasn't enough. That is the hardest part of this story to sit with, and also the most important, because it's not really a story about one bad man in Dayton, Ohio. It's a story that has happened, in different forms, in different cities, more times than anyone can count. A woman leaves. A man refuses to accept it. And somewhere in that gap between leaving and being truly safe, something terrible happens. Montanae Davis was 26 years old. She was a mother of two. She tried to protect herself and her children the best way she knew how. Her story ended in a Dayton kitchen in the early morning hours of April 3, 2024. But it didn't end there completely. It continued in a courtroom, where a jury heard every piece of evidence and did not hesitate to convict. It continued when a judge handed down the maximum possible sentence the law allowed. And it continues now. Every time her name is said out loud, every time her children ask about her, every time someone hears this story and remembers that behind every case number and court date, there was a real person, a mother, a daughter, a friend, whose life mattered, and whose story deserves to be told honestly and remembered clearly. Jamarte Brown will spend the rest of his life in prison. He will never walk free again. It will never undo what happened on Torrington Place. But it does mean that the last chapter of this story belongs to accountability, not to the man who tried to escape it by hiding a gun in a storm drain, wrapped in a child's shirt, hoping no one would ever find it. Someone did find it. The truth came out, and in the end, justice, even late, even imperfect, still had the final word.